Tim Kirby Russia hot takes the imminent Russian attack on Ukraine, or so says the mainstream media. Now, guys, isn't it a bit strange that the entire mainstream media, be it Fox, CNN, BBC, or whatever, all these different media organizations, all at exactly the same time said that Russia is going to invade the Ukraine without any evidence?
Now, the White House says the situation between Russia and Ukraine is extremely dangerous and that Russia could at any point launch an attack. Russia has deployed around 100,000 troops at the border, but denies that it's planning to invade.
Now, if we remember back, there was some evidence that supposedly the leader of Iraq, Saddam Hussein, had weapons of mass destruction, and that those weapons could be used against possibly Israel, or even very likely the United States, or other nations, even be they Iran, because he did use some pretty nasty weapons against the Iranians when he was at war with them. So that seemed pretty plausible. The media told us that they had evidence of it, and guess what? There was nothing.
I take the threat very seriously. I take the fact that he develops weapons of mass destruction very seriously.
A little longer than a few minutes later.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere.
After essentially taking over Iraq, lock, stock, and two smoking barrels, they didn't find anything. There was zero evidence. So maybe this time, with this whole supposed Russian plan, they're just not going to even bother with the whole evidence side of things. But then again, they do have these very lovely maps. Maybe that's the trick. So one sort of pseudo-evidence that's being provided are these like plans of invasion, how the invasion will look, how many people will die, where the forces would come from, and so on. That's interesting, but that's sort of a pretty basic hypothetical. Okay, let's just jump into the theater of the absurd, friends. I took a screenshot here of Google, which is going to appear very soon, and guess what? I'm going to make plans to invade Canada from America. Yeah, why not? In those Fallout video games, America annexed Canada, so why not go into the Fallout universe here? So invading Canada by the United States would probably look something like this. First off, Washington would need to make a deal with Quebec, who's wanted independence for some time, to side with Washington. So that way Quebec is sort of broken off, divides a little bit of sort of the eastern provinces, the island, Nova Scotia and all that, are sort of stuck away from the rest of Canada. Then you would want to spend maybe some forces to sort of surround Vancouver, but the real mission would be to go around and through the Great Lakes, so sort of through Detroit, upstate New York, and maybe around the top of Minnesota, because that's really where the overwhelming population core of Canada is. And any sort of invasion of Canada would need to go up there, because essentially that's really the striking point. Once Ottawa and Toronto fall, that's the end of things. Now, I made a plan for the invasion of Canada that makes perfect sense, is totally reasonable, obeys the laws of geopolitics. Is it going to happen? Of course not. Of course not. So just because maybe the plans that someone shows on a CNN monitor seem reasonable doesn't mean that they are. Okay, so why is the mainstream media doing this? I think it has something to do with a certain problem that a lot of siblings have. So, say there's two brothers, and the one brother is always like, Jimmy wants to take all the cookies. He's the one who took from the cookie jar. Look at him. He's going to do it. I'm sure. Tonight, there's going to be -1 cookie. It's going to happen for sure. And so the one brother goes around propagandizing all of his relatives so much about this cookie jar. But he lets Jimmy know about this, that Jimmy gets really apprehensive about the cookies. He's so worried that he's going to get blamed for anything that happens with these cookies that he just probably doesn't even want to look at them and doesn't even want to touch them. And I think that that's kind of the thing that they're doing here, that they're trying to show this narrative so much that anything that Russia does, it'll be evil, that, if anything happens in the Ukraine, even if our side causes it, even if that happens, it's them that's doing it. They've really created this gigantic shadow of blame onto the other side, which gives them the ability to steal some cookies in the middle of the night and not get blamed. Haha. So I think that's probably what's happening here. This is another interesting thing that doesn't really get specifically talked about very much. I'm probably one of the first people in the sort of, I don't even want to call it, political analyst sphere, who made the point that, guys, Trump destroyed the war on terror. Remember that whole war on terror thing that we've been fighting for decades? It's gone. It's kind of faded out with a whimper. I know when Afghanistan fell, that was less than a whimper. But overall, it just sort of quietly ended. One thing is, as we know, Washington and the military-industrial complex do not live very well without an enemy. So this whole Ukrainian crisis is probably just rooted with this shift away from war on terror to war against Russia, China. Probably more so Russia because it's less important to the West than China is. But guys, this might not always be so bad. Because the mainstream media is really the one that's creating this big narrative. And it's not some kind of false flag or other action. It's just a big media narrative. And that big media narrative is enough to justify some massive, titanic military spending. If the sort of view of things that the military-industrial complex is this out-of-control monster that's forced the United States into a lot of different conflicts, we're at the point where I don't think that the monster really needs justification. Like in the past, you had to make up excuses why we'd send forces here or there. I don't think it matters anymore. I think we can just say in the media, Russia, bad. That's it. That's all the justification they need to ever increase the military budget to infinity. So actually, as it stands today, this isn't too bad. I'd rather the United States military, if it's going to be fighting a pointless war, it's much better that it fights a pointless war against ghosts and shadows, because then no American soldiers die. So that's nice.